Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Synth Breakdown. Today we are looking at Voodoo People by the Prodigy. So this is a 1994 techno single released by the band. So, doing some research, it looks like there is some speculation on what synthesizer was really used on the sound. It's between the Roland JD800 and the Roland JD990. In an interview by Korg magazine in 1993, Liam talks about how he tried the JD800 and didn't like it, so he swapped it out for the Jupiter 8 instead. So this probably leans towards the fact that if you didn't have that synth, it probably wasn't the sound that we hear on the record today. So now that we got that settled and out of the way, let's get down to business and figure this sound out. And let's give that a quick little listen. Oh, such a juicy lead. All right, so we're gonna jump into our DAW here. In this case, I have Ableton 11 open. We're gonna start with the first step, which is the input. So the sequence of notation here looks like so. Let me just fold this and make it a little larger. So you see it's a lot of staccato notes and then a lot of swoops up and down. You need to have these notes carry over. You'll see these notes in particular, because there is going to be a lot of gliding up and down, you're going to need a lot of overhang on the notes, and that just comes with like finicky kind of little things like this and this. You'll see how that comes into play soon. But a lot of staccato, making sure the notes aren't always equal in length. There is short notes and long notes. That really is a definitive part of this sound. Cool. So what you're hearing there, that's a square wave with a little bit of pulse width modulation. Actually, it's not modulating, but a bit of a pulse width change, about 50%. So it's not quite a square wave, it's more of a pulse wave. And what we have here for the envelope, it's pretty much just a binary on and off. Right? It just happens and then it stops. For this envelope here, you'll see how that plays into a filter we're going to put on it. But before we do that, I'm going to add a second oscillator, which is just basically a sine wave that's going to give us a bit more oomph to it. And I think that's an octave down there. And that'll be a lot easier on the distortions we're going to add on later. So next step, we're going to add a filter. And it's going to be filtered from both sides. And notice that there's going to be a really high resonance peak, just kind of in the mids there. So what's happening here is this envelope is making every note kind of drop immediately, so it kind of gives it a ow, ow kind of sound, but very subtle. If you go into the MIDI control here, we can see that the note itself is affecting the filter frequencies. So what that means is the note gets higher, this gets higher, note gets lower, this gets lower, and we can see that in action. So those low drops make the filter kind of get a lot lower there, and I think that's kind of a definitive sound of it as well. Other important things are mono for the sound and a bit of glide, so you get kind of like a swoop up and down. So you notice that the sound is quite dark, it's quite muffled and muted, but that is important, and that'll get changed later once we add other effects to it, which is really an unintuitive and interesting effect, I find. So we're going to add some EQ. It's a very mid-heavy sound. And next thing is going to add some overdrive. That's very harsh sound. But if I'm an overdrive with a pedal, it's kind of... See, like the thing is, with just the pedal's just a distortion pedal. Any kind of VST or anything can mimic the sound. But without the overdrive, it's a bit still too dark. And with it, you start to get that kind of throatiness. Now, you could, play around with filters and stuff at the beginning if you wanted to, but I find having this muffledness and then pulling this distortion out of the muffledness is kind of more akin to the original sound instead of just starting with a bright sound. Yeah, that's kind of a bit more throaty. Next is a bit of reverb. And it does have quite a bit of tail to it. So you can see in this one, I just have a regular hall kind of digital reverb sound going on. Actually, I put the vintage on old on this one, just, because it's 94. And the dryness is, it's pretty dry. You don't want to wash it. Right? The sound is still very much there. This just kind of fills in those little, right? That little pause, which is trail. Especially since the sound, it has a solo part in the song. You don't really want any harsh gaps, so that's just going to feel a little strange. And then lastly, a third definitive part is the ping pong echo. I love it. I'm very proud of this sound. I think it's one of my favorites for sure. If you have any questions or anything, I mean, we can start a conversation in the chat down below. But otherwise, thank you for following along with this tutorial. You send me whatever you've made, we can talk about it, and you have more suggestions. I'm always reading everything, and I try to respond. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.